Joseph read to us this morning, give him a spirit of unction that only comes from you. Bless his heart as he studied and as he relates whatever he's found in the scripture to pour out to us. In Jesus' name, amen.
Thank you. Well, good morning. Welcome everyone out here this morning. Welcome to the visitors. Weldon, it's good to see you guys here. Thanks for coming. So yeah, it's good to be here. It's good to be back home again. Spent the weekend last week in Indiana. I didn't even go to church because of snow and stuff up there. So it seems when I miss a Sunday, I feel like I missed out. So it's good to be in church again this morning. Thank you, Jerry, for those songs. There was a phrase in Joy to the World that I never, thought of before. First verse, joy to the world, the Lord is come. Let earth receive her King. Let every heart prepare him room. Is my heart like that this morning? Have I made room for Jesus in my life this morning? I just stood out to me, that phrase. That song, Lo I Come, that was one of the first chorus we did here. We sang that song. And that always brings back memories of going to Kansas on some cold winter day and doing a program out there in Hutchinson. But that song has a tremendous message behind it. And thank you, Jerry, for pointing that out. Walk beside me and guide me. That's something daily that we need to ask God to help us with. All right, for a message this morning, I'll look in Genesis 37 is where I want to start, and talk about the life of Joseph. Mike, you mentioned him in our Sunday school lesson, so that's where my thoughts were this last month, I guess you might say. It's kind of interesting. On a family chat we had not too long ago, we were discussing, I don't know what was being all shared and said, but my brother made the comment talked about Joseph, and a comment was made, and this is where my title came from, faithfulness in the little things. And that's what he would have shared that day on our family chat, was how we need to be faithful in the little things of life. And so I want to look at Joseph and see how Joseph did that in his life, how he was faithful in the small things of life, how God blessed him, and it led him to where he was overseer of Egypt there and things. So Genesis 37, where we want to start reading. Start verse 1 there. And Jacob dwelt in a land wherein his father was a stranger, in the land of Canaan. These are the generations of Jacob, Joseph being 17 years old. As far as I know, this is the first place in Scripture where it talks about Joseph, and he is 17 years old at this point. He was feeding the flock with his brethren, and the lad was with the sons of Bela, and with the sons of Zilpah, his father's wives. And Joseph brought unto his father their evil report. Now Israel loved Joseph more than all his children, because he was a son of old age, and he made him a coat of many colors. And when his brethren saw that their father loved him more than all his brethren, they hated him and could not speak peaceably with him. I guess what stood out to me here is his verse 3 there a little bit. Israel loved Joseph more than all his children, which just really doesn't tie into what my title is, but how Israel was showing favoritism toward Joseph there. You'd have thought he'd have learned his lesson from years back, how favoritism got him in trouble, or got them in trouble then, and now he's actually showing favoritism to Joseph again here, with making him that coat of many colors, and how that affected his brothers. They hated him. They couldn't even live peaceably with him. So just kind of a side note there of what favoritism can do and how that just doesn't work. Reading on, and Joseph dreamed a dream, and he told it to his brethren, and they hated him yet the more. And he said unto them, Hear, I pray you, this dream which I have dreamed. For behold, we were binding sheaves in the field, and lo, my sheaf arose and also stood upright. And behold, your sheaves stood round about, and made obeisance to my sheaf, which bowed down to his sheaf. And his brethren said unto him, Shalt thou indeed reign over us, or shalt thou indeed have dominion over us? And they hated him yet the more for his dreams and for his words. That phrase that they said, shalt thou indeed reign over us, or shalt thou indeed have dominion over us? Little did they realize that that was actually going to happen. Years, down the road. I think it would have been 13 years later then. But little did they know that was going to happen. And again, how his brothers hated him. So Joseph was being treated the way that he was. And we'll see later how he still remained faithful even though he was treated the way that he was. Read on in verse 9. And he dreamed yet another dream, and told it to his brethren. And behold, I have dreamed a dream more. And behold, the sun, the moon, and the 11 stars made obeisance to me, or they bowed down to me. And he told it to his father and to his brethren. And his father rebuked him, and said unto him, What is this dream that thou dreamest? Shall I and thy mother and thy brethren indeed come bow down ourselves to thee to the earth? And his brethren envied him, but his father observed the sayings. So again, I think what that is referring to, the sun, moon, and stars. His family was going to come bow down to him. That was going to happen. There'll be I'll do a lot of reading here for a bit, but verses 12 through, I'll just read down through here. And his brethren went to feed their father's flock in Shechem. So here, Joseph was again supposed to go out and check up on his brothers. And Israel said unto Joseph, Do not thy brethren feed the flock in Shechem? Come, I will send thee unto them. And he said unto them, Here I am. And he said to him, Go, I pray thee, see whether it be well with thy brethren, and well with the flocks, and bring me word again. So he sent him out of the vale of Hebron, and came unto Shechem. And a certain man found him, and behold, he was wandering in the field, and a man asked him, saying, What seekest thou? And he said, I seek my brethren. Tell me, I pray thee, where they feed their flocks. And the man said, They are departed hence, for I heard them say, Let us go to Dothan. And Joseph went after his brethren and sent them. And Joseph went after his brethren and found them in Dothan. And when they saw him afar off, even before he came near unto them, they conspired against him to slay him. And they said one to another, Behold, this dreamer cometh. Come now, therefore, let us slay him and cast him into a pit, and we will say, Some evil beast hath devoured him, and we shall see what will become of his dreams. So again, it's just interesting to me how Joseph, they seen him coming way out there, and they were ready. The hatred already boiled up in them. They were already ready to kill him. They wanted to get rid of him. Just being very abusive to the younger brother. And Reuben heard it and delivered him out of their hands and said, Let us not kill him. And Reuben said unto them, Shed no blood, but cast him into this pit that is in the wilderness, and lay no hand upon him, that he might rid him out of their hands, to deliver him to his father again. And it came to pass, when Joseph was come unto his brethren, they stripped Joseph out of his coat of many colors that was on him, and they took him, cast him into a pit, and the pit was empty, there was no water in it. So here Reuben, he was one, he said, Let's not kill him. Let's shed no blood here, but let's cast him into a pit here. Let's just get rid of him for now. And his idea was to somehow, some way, get him back to his father again. So they put him in the pit, but they kept his coat of many colors. Verse 25, And they sat down to eat bread, and they lifted up their eyes and looked, and behold, a company of Ishmaelites came from Gilead, with their camels bearing spicery and balm and myrrh, coming to carry it down to Egypt. And Judah said unto his brethren, What profit is it if we slay our brother and conceal his blood? Come, let us sell him to the Ishmaelites, and let not our hand be upon him, for he is our brother and our flesh. And his brothers were content. Then there passed by Midianites, merchantmen, and they drew and lifted up Joseph out of the pit, and sold Joseph to the Ishmaelites for 20 pieces of silver, and they brought Joseph to Egypt. So yeah, another way they decided they can get rid of Joseph. Hatred was taking its toll here, and the brothers were just wanting to get rid of him. It didn't matter what happened, what they had to do. They wanted to get rid of Joseph. Verse 29, And Reuben returned to the pit. Behold, Joseph was not there, and he rent his clothes. And he returned unto his brethren and said, The child is not, and I, whither shall I go? And they took Joseph's coat, killed a kid of goats, and dipped the coat in blood, and they sent the coat of many colors, and they brought it to their father and said, This have we found. Now know now whether it be thy son's coat or no. And he knew it, and said, It is my son's coat. An evil beast hath devoured him. Joseph is without doubt rent into pieces. And Jacob rent his clothes, put sackcloth upon his loins, and mourned for his son for many days. And all his sons and daughters rose up to comfort him, but he refused to be comforted, and he said, For I will go down into the grave unto my son mourning. Thus his father wept for him. And the Midianites sold him into Egypt unto Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh's, and the captain of the guard. So yeah, Reuben here was very upset that they did what they did. They took Joseph's coat, the coat of many colors, dipped it in blood, took it back to their father, making him think that a wild animal had killed him, basically deceiving their father, being very deceptive of what took place. Put yourself in Joseph's shoes about right now. You know, being hated by his brothers, thrown into a pit, sold to complete strangers. You think, could have you had the heart that Joseph had? Could have you been faithful? You think that Joseph would have started to become hard-hearted. He would have, lost his faith, lost his patience. But no, Joseph remained faithful. And even through all, that difficult time in his life, he didn't turn back. He didn't back down. He kept going forward, and he stayed faithful in the little things that he may have been taught from growing up. We'll jump over to chapter 39, kind of keep on with the story here. And this is where Joseph's true test came in. We're chapter 39, verse 1. And Joseph was brought down to Egypt, and Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, captain of the guard, an Egyptian, brought him of the hands of the Ishmaelites, which had brought him down hither. And the Lord was with Joseph, and he prospered, and he was a prosperous man, and he was in the house of his master, the Egyptian. And his master saw the Lord was with him, and that the Lord made all that he did to prosper in his hands. Quite obvious to me here that where Joseph's heart was, and that Joseph was faithful. Joseph kept God number one in his life. Because in verse 2, the Lord was with Joseph, and he was a prosperous man. God was with him. God was carrying him through. And how his master saw how the Lord was with him. People around us can see if God is with us. People around us can see who we serve and what we serve. And it was obvious to Joseph's master that he was serving the true God, and that he was being faithful to his God. Verse 4, Joseph found grace in his sight and served him, and he was made him overseer over his house and all that he put into his hand. And it came to pass from the time that he had made him overseer in his house and over all that he had, that the Lord blessed the Egyptian house for Joseph's sake, and the blessing of the Lord was upon all that he had in the house and in the field. And he left all that he had in Joseph's hand, and knew not aught he had save the bread which he did eat, and Joseph was a goodly person and well favored. So the master here seen Joseph's faithfulness. The master seen Joseph being a godly man, a faithful man, and made him overseer over his household. So yeah, if we go on to verse 7 there, it came to pass that this is where the temptation came to Joseph, and it came to pass after these things that the master's wife cast her hands upon Joseph and said, Lie with me. But he refused and said unto his master's wife, Behold, my master wanteth not what is with me in the house, and he hath committed all that he hath in my hand. There is none greater in this house than I. Neither hath he kept anything from me but thee, because thou art his wife. How can I do this great wickedness and sin against God? So yeah, Joseph was tempted here. And, it's just the question I had, how did he remain strong? And what Joseph's response was. Joseph's strength to remain strong came from his continual obedience in Christ. Being faithful to God and heeding what God had asked him to do in his life. He had a heart that was willing to do what was right. And that kept him from yielding to that temptation. There in verse 9, how then can I do this great wickedness and sin against God? Joseph recognized who he was sinning against. It wasn't his master. It wasn't his own self. He was sinning against God. And Joseph knew that it was God he was sinning against, and God who had to be accountable to. So yeah. And how can I do this great wickedness? He recognized sin for what it was. We talked about it a little in Sunday school. Sin, no matter large or small, sin is sin. Whether you have cheating, lying, not responding properly to situations, lust. You can put whatever you want in there. Sin is sin. Matthew Henry says, call it by its own name and never go about to lessen it. That is sin. It is what it is. And Joseph recognized the sin. And Joseph stood up. And he knew who would help him come through this. Verse 11, and it came to pass about this time that Joseph went into the house to do his business, and there was none of the men of the house there within. And she caught him by his garment, saying, Lie with me. And he left his garment in her hand and fled and got him out. Joseph was alone in the house, but yet he didn't give in. God helped him be strong. He turned around and he fled. He ran away from it. When we're tempted to do evil, when we're tempted to do wrong, do we recognize the wrong of what it is? Do we tell ourselves it's wrong? Do we call it sin? Do we turn around and run from it? Are we faithful? Each victory will help you some other to win. There's a song that phrase is in. I didn't look it up, but every time we have victory, every time we win, it will make us stronger for the next battle that comes. So being faithful in the small things, every little thing that comes along, every time we're tempted, every small thing that comes along, if we win, if we ask God to help us, we can become stronger. We can easier walk away, because God is there to help us if we ask Him. verse 13 and 19 then, and it came to pass when she saw that he had left his garment in her hand and was fled, that she called unto the men of her house, and spake unto them, saying, See, he hath brought in, and he brew unto us to mock us. He came in unto me to lie with me, and I cried with a loud voice. And it came to pass, when he heard that I lifted up my voice and cried, they left his garments with me and fled and got him out. And she laid up his garments by her until his Lord came home. And she spake unto him according to these words, saying, The Hebrew servant which thou hast brought unto us came in unto me to mock me. And it came to pass, as I lifted up my voice and cried, that he left his garment with me and fled out. And it came to pass, when the master heard the words of his wife, which she spake unto him, saying, After this manner did thy servant to me, that his wrath was kindled. So here Joseph is accused of doing something that he didn't even do. And yeah, I think some of us know, I mean, if we've been falsely accused, that doesn't feel good. And here Joseph is accused of doing something that he never did. And, you know, it's just amazing to me. You'd think by now how often Joseph was, well, how his brothers treated him, and now how she has treated him, how he's being treated here. You'd think he'd give in. You'd think, you know, but yet he didn't. He stayed faithful. Verse 20, And Joseph's master took him, put him into prison, a place where the king's prisoners were bound, and he was there in prison. Verse 21, But the Lord was with him. That has come through this story several times already, how God was with Joseph. God never left him. He was always there for him, showed him mercy, gave him favor in the sight of the keeper of the prison. And the keeper of the prison committed to Joseph's hand and all the prisoners that were in prison, and whatsoever they did there, he was the doer of it. The keeper of the prison looked not to anything that was under his hand, because the Lord was with him, and that which he did, the Lord made it to prosper. So even while he was in jail, even while he was in prison, he was faithful. And that didn't get Joseph down. God was still with him. God showed him mercy. God showed him grace. And everything that he was going through, God still had a big plan for Joseph. One thing I see here too in these last several verses is Joseph didn't allow the situation at hand to ruin relationships. You know, with the prisoners that he was in prison with, his relationship with God, that wasn't ruined. His relationship with those around him, you know, he was still faithful. He was still who God wanted him to be. I think we can relate with that. We've all been or are going through tough times in our lives. A lot of us have been there. Things that get us down, whether it's financial, physical things, stressful things. But God doesn't promise us that every day is going to be good, but he does promise us strength for the day, no matter what he brings into our lives. And I know Joseph sensed that here. He knew God was there with him. But yeah, don't allow the situations in life to get you down, no matter what. Several other things that just stood out to me in the life of Joseph was, of course, his faith, but his patience. And I think Joseph had a lot of patience here. He could have become frustrated. He could have the frustration part, I guess, is what I was thinking of. But he trusted God's plan even when he couldn't see the end results of it. How often does our trust and faith in God start to waver when we can't see the other end? We don't know where this situation is going to go to. So we start to not trust. Our faith starts to lose out. But Joseph here, even though he couldn't see the end result of what God was taking him through, he was faithful. And he had patience. Joseph's integrity stood out to me here. You know, with Despite being a slave and a prisoner, he maintained his integrity and faithfulness, which allowed God to bless the work of his hands, and he remained faithful and held on to his integrity even when no one was looking. So we see here that, Joseph's integrity, no one was around, no one was looking, but yet he was faithful. And he remained strong. When sin happened, he turned around and ran the other direction. Even though Joseph was suffering, he was still serving others. He was using the talents that God gave him, and that was serving others. And I think Joseph did very well in his life to serve those around him and to just be there and encourage and whatever needed to be done. Joseph was a hard worker, and that is where how he prospered was through that hard work and serving other people, even though he was in jail, even though life may not have been as good as what he wanted it. God had a purpose and a vision for Joseph. The dreams that God gave Joseph, a dream that guided him and helped him overcome temptation and hardships. I think these dreams that God gave Joseph were there to help him, to give him strength, to help him through the times of his life. And no matter who we are, God uses us all. Joseph was just a teenager here, but yet God used him in a powerful way. It doesn't matter what age of life we are. It doesn't matter how old we are, how young we are. God can use us for things in his life, to serve him, we need to allow him to work in our lives, and God can use us all. Chapter 40, I'm not going to read through that. There was just several dreams there that he had dreamed and interpreted. And chapter 41 starts in with the dream that Pharaoh had. I'm not going to read the whole chapter, but it was the dream of the 7 years of plenty, the 7 years of famine. The chief butler telling Pharaoh how Joseph interpreted his dreams. Pharaoh calling for Joseph, and Joseph interpreting Pharaoh's dreams. And somewhere in that chapter, I didn't mark it, but it says Joseph again recognized God in all this. The dreams that he interpreted and the things that were happening, Joseph continued to recognize God in the whole picture. I think in that chapter 2, it was 13 years after he was sold into Egypt. He is now a ruler. The 7 years of plenty came and went. The years of famine came. And Joseph, being the ruler there, in the years of famine, opened up the storehouses. The brothers in this chapter came for grain, went home again, found the money in their bags, and were very confused. They went back again. This time they took double the money along. And it was just amazing as I read through that chapter how Joseph knew who his brothers were, and he was very harsh to them. He was mean to them in a sense. At one point, I think on that second trip is when he kept Simeon, sent the rest home, demanding that they bring Benjamin back. And I think that's, chapter 43 was a second trip into Egypt, the missing cup. And then chapter 45 is where I want to start in again. Just verses 3 through 5 are the only ones I want to read here. It says, "And Joseph," this is when the brothers came back again, and Joseph made himself known unto his brothers. "And Joseph said unto his brothers, I am Joseph. Doth my father yet live? And his brethren could not answer him, for they were troubled at his presence." Wonder how I would have reacted if I'd all of a sudden realized who I was standing in front of. And Joseph said unto his brethren, Come near unto me, I pray you. And they came near, and he said, I am Joseph your brother, whom you sold into Egypt. Now therefore be not grieved, nor angry with yourselves, that ye sold me hither. And again here Joseph recognized that it was God that allowed these things to happen. He said, For God did send me before you to preserve life. Joseph always had God in the forefront of everything he did, and he was always faithful. God had a reason for putting Joseph through all that he did, and Joseph was faithful in all the small things that God put him through. So yeah, Joseph there, he was there for a reason. He was there for a purpose. And we are all of us are here for a reason. We're all here for a purpose. God has us here today for a reason. He knew many, many years ago that today you were going to be 6 years old, 10 years old, a teenager, 13 years wishing you were 16, 16 wishing you were 21, married with young children, married with teenagers, grandparents. God knew all that, and we're all here for a reason. We're all here for a purpose. And are we faithful in the little things that God asks us to do? Are you okay where God has you in your life? Am I okay where God has me? Am I content where God has me in my life? Am I okay with what God has in my life for me? Am I faithfully serving God in the small things that He's asking me to do? Thought of the story of the talents in Matthew chapter 5. Matthew 25. You know, we all have talents. We all have something that we're good at. And are we faithful in building on those? Starting at verse 14. Actually, I won't read all of it. He gave some 5 talents, gave some 2, and gave some 1 talent. But the one that had 5 talents, when his Lord came back, he said in verse 21, Well done, thou good and faithful servant. Thou hast been faithful over a few things. I will make thee ruler over many things. Enter thou into the joy of thy Lord. And also the one that had received 2 talents. Verse 23, Well done, good and faithful servant. Thou hast been faithful over a few things. I will make thee ruler over many things. Enter thou into the joy of thy Lord. Then he which had received 1 talent came and said, Lord, I knew thee that thou art a hard man, reaping where thou hast not sown, and gathering where thou hast not strawed. And I was afraid, and went and hid thy talent in the earth. Lo, there thou hast that is thine. And his Lord answered and said unto him, Thou wicked and slothful servant, thou knewest that I reaped where I sowed not, and gathered where I have not strawed. Thou oughtest therefore have put my money to the exchangers, and then at my coming I should have received my own with usury. So yeah, are you hiding your talents? Or are you using the talents God gave you and being faithful with those talents and using them as God would want you to use them? In 2 Kings, there's another story that I want to look at a little bit. 2 Kings chapter 5 is a story of Naaman. And this story rings in my mind when just thinking back when I was younger and sitting in front of them cassette tapes and listening to the stories out of my Bible friends' storybooks. Naaman here was a king of Syria. He was a great man. He was an honorable man, it says. But yet he was a leper. Great success, a mighty man. But yet he suffered from an incurable disease back then. And there was a maid there that was helping them, and she said, hey, why don't you, actually let's just read down through this. Verse 2, and the Syrians came out by companies and had brought away captain over the land of Israel, a little maid, and she waited on Naaman's wife. And she said unto her mistress, Would God my Lord were with the prophet that is in Samaria, for he would recover him of his leprosy. And one went out and told his Lord, saying, Thus and thus saith the maid that is of the land of Israel. And the king of Syria said, Go, I will send a letter unto the king of Israel. He departed and took with him 10 talents of silver, 6,000 pieces of gold, and 10 changes of raiment. And he brought the letter to the king of Israel, saying, Now when this letter is come unto thee, behold, I have therewith sent Naaman my servant to thee, that thou mayest recover him of his leprosy. And it came to pass, when the king of Israel had read the letter, that he rent his clothes and said, Am I God, to kill and to make alive, that this man does send unto me to recover a man of his leprosy? Wherefore consider, I pray you, see how he seeketh a quarrel against me. And so it was, when Elisha the man of God had heard the king of Israel had rent his clothes, he sent unto the king, saying, Wherefore hast thou rent thy clothes? Let him come now to me, and he shall know that there is a prophet in Israel. So Naaman came with his horses and chariots and stood at the door of the house of Elisha. Elisha sent a messenger to him, saying, Go and wash in the Jordan River 7 times, and thy flesh shall come again to thee, and thou shalt be clean. But Naaman was wroth, and he went away and said, Behold, I thought he would surely come out to me, and stand and call on the name of the Lord his God, and strike his hand over the place, and recover the leper. Very interesting how Naaman responded. You know, the Jordan River, I think, was what they say one of the muddiest rivers around. And Naaman was like, no way he's not going to go dip in that Jordan River. Why? Surely, you know, he wanted to see some big thing. He wanted something big to happen. But yet he was told to go dip in the Jordan River. Are not Abana, verse 12, and Pharpar, river of Damascus, better than all the waters of Israel? May I not wash in them and be clean? So he turned and went away in a rage. And his servants came near and spake unto them, My father, if the prophet had bid thee to do some great thing, wouldest thou not have done it? How much rather then when he saith, Wash and be clean? Then he went down, dipped himself 7 times in the Jordan, according to the saying of the man of God, and his flesh came again like unto the flesh of a little child, and he was clean. Naaman was upset, and they reminded him, if you'd have been asked to do a big thing, would have you not done it? Why don't you do this little thing? Why don't you go do this? So he did, and he didn't stop at 3 and 4 times. He dipped the 7th time, and he was made clean. Being faithful in the little things of life, doing what we're called to do, doing what we're asked to do. Yeah, and just being faithful where God wants us to serve. And again, it's just questions for myself, you know, am I okay where God has me? Am I content where God has me? And just to be faithful in where I am in life, and not be looking for the big things, but be looking at the small things, doing the small things, and just being faithful in them. So yeah, definitely a challenge for me as I looked into that. And it was good for me to look at the life of Joseph and what all he went through, trials, tribulations, but yet he was faithful. Let's bow our heads for a word of prayer. Father, thank you for today. Thank you for the opportunity we've had to come to your house and to worship you. Pray, Lord, that you would help us to be faithful to you. Help us to be faithful in our lives where you've called each one of us. I just pray special blessing on each one that's here as we go from here, that you be with us this week, that we could be true and faithful to you. We can live our lives that are pleasing